Welcome back to Norcom's History, and welcome to the first update on Tyr of 2026. Last time we talked about some of the major changes that was going to be happening, and of course the smaller updates of the project, and today I want to share with you some of the really nice nitty-gritty details of the restoration itself. We have a lot of interesting things and a lot of big milestones that has happened since we talked last, and of course we'll be talking about some of the challenges that the Tyr project has faced along the way. So without further ado, let's take a look. When Tyr first arrived at Bredalsholmen, the first impression was that the ship had survived surprisingly well. She had obviously seen better days, but she'd been afloat for years, and from the outside there were no enormous holes or dramatic signs that she was about to fall apart. But old ships can be deceptive. In this case, what kept Tyr watertight for so long was not necessarily good steel or a healthy hull. A lot of it was simply a result of time. Rust, marine growth, dirt, and layers of old bottom paint had built up across the underwater hull. All of that material had effectively helped seal the ship, and it acted almost as an accidental coating, not something you really want to rely on, but enough to hide the real condition underneath. So when the hull was finally pressure washed and cleaned back properly, the truth started to appear, and that truth was not pretty. Once the rust, growth, and anti-fouling were removed, the team found close to 100 small holes in the hull. Not one huge dramatic gash, and not one single easy repair. Instead, the problem was spread across the ship in many small spaces: pinholes, deep corrosion pits, weakened rivet heads, thin areas of steel, and seams that were no longer properly tight. And in some ways, that is more difficult to deal with. One large hole is obvious. You can see it, measure it, cut it out, and repair it. But when the hull has dozens and dozens of smaller weak points, you have to treat the entire area with suspicion. You cannot just fix what looks bad from a distance. You have to go over the steel carefully, section by section, because any missed point could become a weak point later. And that is what made this phase so time-consuming. During February, the main priority was getting the hull tight. At first, this might sound simple. Find the holes, weld them shut, and move on. But on a riveted steel hull of this age, it was never that straightforward. Tyr's hull is not a modern welded construction. It's an older riveted structure, made from steel plates joined together mechanically. The plates, rivets, seams, and frames all work together, so when corrosion starts attacking one part of the system, the issue is rarely isolated. In several places, the steel had suffered very deep pitting. That means that the surface had not just rusted lightly, but it really had been eaten into by the rust. The steel had lost its thickness, and in some spots, it was still technically there, but weakened enough that you could not trust it. And then there were the rivets. On a riveted vessel, the rivet heads are crucial. They clamp the plates together and help keep the hull tight. But in Tyr's case, some of these rivet heads had been heavily corroded, and some were almost rusted away. When that happens, the joint can no longer be trusted in the same way. So the team had to take a cautious approach. They could not simply say that this area looks fine. They had to assume that anything questionable might become a problem once the ship was back in the water. That meant welding over holes, sealing corroded areas, repairing around rivets, and reinforcing sections where the steel was too far gone to leave alone. A lot of this work was very slow, repetitive, but extremely important. You clean the area, inspect it, mark the weak points, prepare the surface, weld, grind, and inspect it again, and then move on to the next section. One of the more interesting problems that was discovered during this stage involved the plate seams. In Norwegian, these are described as platestøt, or the vertical joints where steel plates meet each other. On a riveted hull, these seams are especially important. They are the part of the watertight shell of the ship. Over time, however, old seams can start to move or separate slightly, or even lose their tightness. This happens because of, again, corrosion, stress, age, previous repairs, or simply decades of metal flexing and working. On Tyr, some of these plates had opened enough that they were no longer watertight. That does not necessarily mean that ship was about to split open, but it does mean that the old mechanical seal was no longer doing its job, so those seams had to be welded shut. This is a good example of how restoration work often becomes more complicated once you get into the close details. From a distance, the hull might look like one continuous surface, but in reality, it's a collection of plates, joints, rivets, frames, repairs, modifications through the time, each with its own condition and each with its own potential set of problems. When you're trying to make a hull watertight, every one of these details matter. Another major part of the work has been the use of doubling plates. This is something I want to explain very clearly because it is very easy to misunderstand. Doubling the hull means adding new steel over the outside of the weakened areas. Instead of removing every damaged plate immediately and replacing it fully, additional plating is welded over the compromised sections to strengthen and seal them. But in this case, a lot of the work has gone into doubling parts of Tyr's hull. But this is not intended to be the final restoration of the hull. It's only a temporary solution. The plan is that these doubled sections will be removed later when Tyr goes back into dry dock around September or October. At this point, the team will carry out a more permanent and historically appropriate repair plan. Right now, the main goal is to stabilize Tyr. The ship needs to be watertight and needs to be safe enough for the next phase. It needs to be protected from further damage while planning continues. So this stage is not about making every repair perfect forever. It's about stopping the decline and controlling the risk, and making sure that the ship can survive long enough for a deeper restoration work to happen properly. This is an important distinction. Sometimes in restoration, you have to do a temporary work first so that the permanent work can be done correctly later, and that is exactly what is happening in this instance. While the hull work has been the main focus, it's not the only thing that's been happening. Several pieces of heavy deck equipment was also removed during this period. That included the silo, the crane, and the aggregate unit. The crane in particular had to be cut into several sections before removing it because one piece would have taken too much time and effort. There was also access work carried out forward in the ship. A doorway was made into the forepeak area, making it easier to reach parts of the structure that needed cleaning, inspection, or future work. So while the hull was being sealed from the outside, the ship was slowly being opened up and prepared from the inside. This is actually one of those phases where the vessel can look worse before it looks better. Everything is cut away, the equipment that's not historically correct is removed, temporary openings appear, and rust and damage becomes a lot more visible. But that is a part of the process. You cannot restore what you cannot reach. By March, the project had moved into a new stage. The hull repair work had progressed far enough that it was time to test whether all this effort actually worked. This was a critical moment in any hull repair. Because you can weld, patch, and seal as much as you want, but until the hull is tested, you really don't know if it's tight. So the team carried out water testing using a water jet. The idea was pretty simple. Apply water pressure to the repaired areas and see what happens. If water gets through, you've found another problem. This is careful, methodical work. It's not enough to get it just mostly right, as a hull that is mostly watertight is still a leaking hull. By the end of this process, Tyr's hull had been tested and corrected in several places and finally was approved as tight. This was a major milestone. Because earlier in the process, the ship had been held tight largely by rust, growth, and old bottom paint as we mentioned. Now, after all this work, she had a hull that had actually been repaired, tested, and approved, and that is a very different situation. Once the hull was tight, the next priority was protection. Freshly repaired steel needs to be protected quickly, especially on a vessel that is going to remain in a marine environment. So the hull was coated and painted up to the waterline. One of the important steps here was stripe coating. Stripe coating means you apply extra paint by brush to vulnerable areas before the full spray coating goes on. These vulnerable areas include things like plate edges, rivet heads, seams, and other details where paint coverage could be thinner or where wear is more likely. This is especially important on a hull like Tyr's because the surface is not smooth and simple. It has rivets, seams, old repairs, and the edges and irregularities of time. These are especially the places where corrosion likes to return first. So by stripe coating these areas first, you build up extra protection where it matters most. After that, the hull was spray painted with a 2-part epoxy primer. Visually, this makes a huge difference. The hull goes from looking rust-streaked, patchy, and vulnerable to looking sealed and protected. It is still not the final restoration, of course, but it is a major improvement. And more importantly, it gives the steel a better chance of surviving while the next stages of the project are planned and carried out. Another important job in March was preparing Tyr for undocking and later docking operations. For that, ballast became a key issue. A ship has to sit correctly in the water. It needs to have the right trim, right stability, and the right distribution of weight. Since Tyr has had her heavy equipment removed and is in a changing condition, that balance has to be managed carefully. The solution has been to place large 1,000-liter water tanks inside the ship. These are positioned down in the bonnet area and are filled with water to act as ballast. That might sound simple, but again, The practical side is more complicated. These tanks are large and had to be brought on board, moved into position, secured, and filled. Openings had to be made to get them into the right areas, and the team had to consider where the weight should sit in the vessel. This is not just about adding a weight randomly, but it's about controlling how the ship actually behaves. Too much weight in the wrong place can create problems. Correctly placed ballast helps the ship sit properly and makes the next stages safer. So, while this might not be as dramatic as welding or painting, it is a crucial part for preparing Tyr for movement and future dock work. After hull repairs and doubling and painting, she is ready to leave the dock and spend summer along the quay. During the summer, small repairs and preparations will continue while she's moored there. Then, in autumn, the plan is for her to go back into dock. That is when the next major stage begins, removing the 1950s ferry superstructure. Once that's removed, we hope to see what remains of the original wooden deck from 1887, when Tyr was still a gunboat. We do not know how much of it survives, or what condition it will be in, but it should give a much clearer picture of what remains from the original vessel, and what the next steps in the restoration will look like. Alright everyone, that is the status of Tyr as of right now. If you have any questions, I am actually going to be collecting some questions for a Q&A video that I'll be posting on the Patreon on the free tier for now. So if you have any questions to the team that you want to ask the team directly, feel free to comment them there. I will be sharing them to them and getting their answers, and we'll hopefully be making a video once we have enough questions. Also, feel free to like the video. It does actually recommend it to more people, and this is such a really unique project that I think the whole world should know. So feel free to like and share. And as usual, if you want to learn more about Nordic arms and history, consider subscribing. Until the next one, take care. Bye-bye.